This video is brought to you by Nebula. Today, Israel faces a nationwide general strike. Germany's far right celebrates its first major election win in the post-World War II era, and Russia strikes Kharkiv. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Monday the 2nd of September 2024. Our main story today is that a general strike has shut down much of Israel amid growing anger at the government's failure to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas after the death of 6 captives in Gaza at the weekend. The bodies of 6 hostages, including a 23-year-old Israeli American whose parents had lobbied US President Joe Biden for his return, and 4 others kidnapped from the Nova Music Festival, were found in a tunnel dozens of meters underground in Rafah. An Israeli forensics examination determined that they were murdered by Hamas terrorists in a number of shots at close range 48 to 72 hours previously, whilst Hamas suggested in a statement that the group had died in an Israeli airstrike. Histadrut, the country's largest trade union federation, called the strike yesterday, pushing for Netanyahu's government to agree a deal for the return of the last 101 hostages. The strike represents one of the biggest expressions of public anger at Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the war since Hamas's attack on October the 7th last year, and is the first widespread industrial action. Today, departures from Ben Gurion International Airport were halted, universities, shopping malls and ports were shuttered, and government ministries closed. Schools were set to open for only a handful of hours, and activists have blocked roads around the country. The shutdown comes after a night of mass demonstrations of around 500,000 people in Tel Aviv and other cities, the largest since the start of the war in Gaza. Public anger escalated on Sunday, with opposition leader and former Prime Minister Yair Lapid urging people to join demonstrations in Tel Aviv. In Jerusalem, protesters blocked streets and demonstrated outside the Prime Minister's residence. Aerial footage showed Tel Aviv's main highway filled with protesters holding flags with pictures of the slain hostages. Israeli television footage showed police directing water cannons at demonstrators who had blocked roads, and local media reported 29 arrests. The Hostage Families Forum called on Netanyahu to take responsibility and explain what was holding up a ceasefire agreement. And whilst Netanyahu's office said he had spoken to the family of one of the dead hostages, other families have refused to speak to the Prime Minister and have instead called on Israelis to join protests. There's more on the way, but remember to subscribe and ring the bell for more daily briefing tomorrow. Plus, if you want to support the channel like Adam Steiner, then consider joining the new TLDR membership program for just $1.99. Germany's far-right AfD are celebrating their first ever state election win, after coming a strong first and close second in the 2 eastern state elections on Sunday. The elections in Thuringia and Saxony were another bad omen for the 3 parties of the centre-left federal government, the centre-left SPD, Greens and centre-right FDP, as they scored historically bad results. The AfD won a third of the vote in Thuringia, way ahead of the conservative CDU, who received nearly 24%. A brand new party, the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, or BSW, came third, establishing itself as a political force and making it the likely kingmaker in the state government. In Saxony, the AfD, on less than 31%, came a close second to the CDU, who received 32% of the vote. In both Saxony and Thuringia, the populist Left Party saw its vote collapse, particularly in Thuringia, where it had previously been leading the state's government. Anyway, while the AfD are celebrating their best ever result in both states and are claiming a mandate to govern, they're unlikely to lead or join any government, given all other parties rule out working with them. Instead, it's likely that the conservative CDU, currently the main federal opposition, will lead attempts to form governments in both states by looking to the BSW, SPD and Greens for what could end up being slightly ideologically awkward coalitions. If you want to know more about the elections and why the AfD are particularly strong in eastern Germany, then check out the video we released over on the TLDR News EU channel. Russian strikes on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, injured at least 47 people, according to local officials. At the same time, Russia said that it shot down 158 Ukrainian drones in 15 regions of the country, including 2 over Moscow, and admitted that Ukraine had struck a power plant and an oil refinery. This is the latest in a series of devastating strikes carried out in Ukrainian population centres by Russia that have increased in severity since Ukraine invaded Russia's Kursk Oblast last month. This is presumably part of a Russian attempt to re-establish deterrence after Ukraine and its supporters began arguing that Russia's relatively muted response to the Kursk invasion was proof that Russia's escalatory threats were fundamentally empty. In the same vein, on Sunday, Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov announced that Russia would make changes to its nuclear doctrine, presumably lowering the threshold for a first-use strike to deter further Western support for Ukraine. Azerbaijan's ruling party is on course for the narrowest of victories in a snap election called by President Ilham Aliyev. More than 6.4 million people registered to vote in the election, which began yesterday at 8 a.m. and ended 11 hours later. The Central Election Commissioner of Azerbaijan reported that voter turnout was 37.3%. Exit poll results show that Aliyev's new Azerbaijan party was set to win 63 out of 125 seats, down from 69 in the outgoing parliament. According to exit polls, dozens of other seats were set to go to candidates who were nominally independent of political parties, but in practice back the government, and to minor pro-government parties. The main opposition party, the Popular Front Party, boycotted the vote, citing a lack of conditions to hold a free and fair vote. In fact, all previous elections held under Aliyev, who's ruled the country since 2003 after taking over from his father, have been described as undemocratic. Back in February, Aliyev himself extended his 20-year rule in a landslide early presidential election, which observers noted lacked genuine competition. Yesterday's election also comes amidst some important global developments in the region. It's the first parliamentary election to be held in the country since it regained full control of the former breakaway territory of Nagorno-Karabakh in a lightning offensive last year against ethnic Armenian forces earlier this year. Voting was held in Nagorno-Karabakh for the first time in 30 years. Moreover, under the constitution, the election should have been held in November, but Aliyev decreed it to take place 2 months early, as it coincided with the capital, Baku, hosting the United Nations climate talks, known as COP29. In the final uplifting story today, we discuss the comeback of a rare bird. The northern bald ibis was extinct in Europe for around 300 years, but has recently returned with the help of so-called foster parents. Essentially, scientists in small planes helped teach the birds to fly the forgotten migration routes. The scientists showed them the way, waved at them, and shouted encouragement as they flew. Speaking about this plan, biologist Johannes Fritz explained, "It's an almost surreal experience to be up there in the sky with these birds, experiencing them in the air, perfectly shaped for flying. It's a touching and extraordinary experience." And if you wanted to know more, that's not quite all, because we've actually made a new series with Nebula called WTF USA.
Look, as British people, we often cast a wary eye at our friends across the Atlantic. But honestly, the last few months have been especially wild. We've seen Biden bail from the race after a terrible debate.
My fellow Americans.
The red-blue divide making way for lurid green. Trump accusing Kamala of changing her race. Vance getting accused of couches. Endless memes about coconut trees, and endless arguments over crowd sizes.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes.
Obama making a joke. Trump talking about Biden like an ex he misses. RFK Jr. potentially having worms in his brain before admitting to burying a bear in Central Park. Oh, and an assassination attempt that we all kind of forgot about because of all of the other chaos. I mean, honestly, WTF USA. The thing is though, while it might be tempting to just roll your eyes at these shenanigans, these aren't just meme-worthy moments. And you know I'm serious, because I've not stood up in a video since COVID. But these incidents actually pose important questions, like how much does the Gen Z vote matter this time round? How important will online campaigning and social media prove to be? What impact do running mates have? Okay, I don't have words for that one. These are the kinds of things we'll be explaining in our new Nebula original series, What to Follow USA, only on Nebula. Each week, we'll take the moments that have been dominating internet discourse and explaining the true politics under the hood. Look at me pandering to the American audience. We'll be releasing new episodes of What to Follow every Friday through to the election. The fact that it's on Nebula means we've been able to take more risks with this series. The tone and attitude of the show isn't what you'd expect from TLDR. I'm not sure we've talked about fucking couches on YouTube before, but the journalism and reporting is exactly the standard you'd expect. Nebula support also means that we can do things differently, create additional content for you, and tackle topics that the YouTube algorithm just wouldn't normally allow for. It's not just this new series on Nebula either though. There's also incredible originals on the platform like Modern Conflicts from Real Life Lore, or the upcoming documentary from Tom Nicholas, Boomers, which takes a provocative look at the lives and legacy of the baby boom generation. Plus, we also post all of our normal content on Nebula ad-free, and often before it ends up on YouTube. If you want to check all of that out, plus WTF USA, then head to go.nebula.tv/WTF, or click the link in the description. That way, you can pick up an annual Nebula subscription for a huge 40% off. We're really happy with how this new series has turned out, so please do give the series a look. We'd really appreciate it.